Well, now our final session before... final session before we go to our afternoon tea and World Cafe is scope for, case study of VET in schools. So I'm really looking forward to this. I think this will be interesting to see how VET is showcased in Australian schools and industry engagement using new models. And I'd like to ask our three guests to come up, Mr. Ralph Dawson, Justine McNaught-Conroy, and Ms. Radha Chauhan. Would you mind all coming, please, to the stage, and I'll just tell people more about you. Now, Ralph Dawson is CEO of the Construction Training Fund, which is supporting skills training in the West Australian construction industry. So he's an incredibly important person at the moment because this is an area of great need. Justine McNaught-Conroy is Deputy Principal at Clarkson Community High School. She was actually a Japanese language teacher in her initial day job, but she has morphed into developing a great range of experience in educational and teaching roles, primary and secondary teaching, head of department, program coordinator of curriculum, and she provides specific leadership to the arts and vet areas and oversees year 10 to 12 curriculum and achievement. And, wrong here, my final book. And Ms. Radha Chauhan, I'm delighted to say, is joining us. She is Joint Secretary of School Education at the Department of School Education and Literacy in New Delhi. 2 decades worth of experience in public service, very involved in major social sector initiatives, both on the ground and at policy formation level in the role of government, very involved too in the initial stages of rolling out the National E-Governance Plan in India. So a woman with a great deal of experience, and I look forward to hearing, I think, Ralph Dawson, you're kicking off, aren't you? 5 minutes each on VET in schools and whether this furthers our discussion of what could come next. So, Ralph, over to you.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My first task is to apologise on behalf of Ian Hill, the Chair of the Training Accreditation Council in Western Australia. Ian wears 2 hats. He's also the Chairman of the Construction Training Board in WA and my boss, so I've got the job this afternoon. I'm going to quickly go through a brief explanation of the Training Fund in Western Australia and how it works within the construction industry, and then talk more specifically about some work it has done with schools in WA on a new VET program for the construction industry. We'll see how this goes. Unlike Mr. Krishna, who did not need any overheads today, I'm going to go through these. It's an organisation that was established in 1991. It's a small government agency, but it relies completely on money from a training levy, which I'll talk about in a second. It's administered importantly by an industry board made up of 7 members, including an independent chairperson, of course Ian Hill. And importantly, it's strongly supported by industry stakeholders. And part of the reason for that is it enables the industry to really, to use a cricket term, bat above its average in terms of training in WA. In Western Australia, the construction industry is a significant industry. We hear a lot about the mining industry, but the construction industry employs around about 10 to 11% of the state's workforce. And it also employs about 40% of the state's apprentices. So it does extremely well, and it does that in great part because of the support it gets from the Training Fund. Key goals too, to increase the number of skilled workers in the industry, and secondly to support an improvement in the quality of training. Pretty straightforward. It uses the money from the training levy that I mentioned to you. The levy is 0.2% of the project value, and it uses that money, approximately $30 million a year, to provide a range of supports for both employers and workers within the industry. If you're an employer in the industry and you employ an apprentice, we'll pay you up to $16,000 to help defray the cost of employing those apprentices. If you're a worker in the industry and you want to upgrade your skills or undertake a training in occupational safety and health, the Training Fund will pay up to 70% of the cost of that training, and we recognise over 300 different courses. We have a relationship with about 60 private training providers who provide these courses. This financial year, at least last financial year, the Training Fund will have supported close to 32,000 workers to do some form of training. That's about 25 or 26% of the state's workforce, so you can see the impact that the fund is having in training in the industry. The Training Fund's also a training council or a skills council in Western Australia, and it provides advice to the government on training and workforce development issues. One of the key issues that it identified, and its industry stakeholders importantly identified in recent years, has been a problem with the number of young people coming out of the secondary education system. There simply haven't been enough young people entering the industry to meet its workforce needs, nor have those young people necessarily had the preparation and the skill sets necessary to be productive right from the start when industry actually needs that. And so one of the problems with that has been the culture that you've heard about today within not only the education system, but I think the community generally, that vocational education and training is seen as the second priority. The first priority is to get young people into university. Nothing could be further from the truth, and this is one thing that the Training Fund has worked very strongly to try and change within the system. We have been concerned for some time that the curriculum within the education system hasn't been appropriate to meet the industry's needs. Too many options. Schools, with the best of intentions, have often taken various competencies from individual training packages and cobbled them together to try and create a pathway for students which hasn't been clear. It's been confusing for everybody concerned, and the result has been students who aren't really prepared when they come into the industry to take on an apprenticeship. So the Training Fund's worked with our Curriculum Council in Western Australia and with schools and developed a new program. And that program provides a specific pathway to an apprenticeship or a paraprofessional traineeship within the industry. In Year 10, the students will undertake what we call taster courses, try-trade programs that might range between 1 and even, say, 5 trades to get an appreciation of what an individual trade is about. Then they're in a position to make a more informed decision about what they should do, what their courses should be in Year 11 and Year 12. In Year 11, they can undertake the curriculum for a trade occupation or a paraprofessional occupation. And in Year 11, you'll see that the competencies for 11 of the trades in the industry are all generic. They're exactly the same. And so the students have the opportunity to actually go and do those courses, and then some flexibility to decide the apprenticeship they might choose at a later date. In Year 12, they'll move into more specific competencies and then stream into specific trades in the industry. And this gives you a very quick snapshot of how that model would work. Year 10, the try-trade programs. Year 11, the generic competencies into either the trade areas or alternatively into the paraprofessional stream, where they can take up occupations in scheduling or drafting or estimating and so on. In Year 12, then they stream into those different programs in either the wet trades or the timber trades, or alternatively the paraprofessional occupations. So what are the results? The students will complete their West Australian Certificate of Education. They undertake their normal academic education in this program, along with the construction program. They'll gain 240 hours of trade competencies. Importantly, they're also going to gain 220 hours of work experience. One of the most important aspects that we see within the system is for young people who are in school to get some appreciation of what the world of work is about and not start work without having any understanding of what's going on. They'll graduate with a Certificate 2 qualification that's nationally recognised and a West Australian Certificate of Secondary Education. Importantly, every one of the competencies that they've completed in school will articulate to the subsequent apprenticeship or the traineeship. And they will have completed about 2/3 of off-the-job training that was actually required in the subsequent apprenticeship, which makes them very attractive to employers. Finally, there is a mandatory 3-month reduction in the subsequent apprenticeship, and in most cases we believe that the students who complete this program will be able to complete their apprenticeship much sooner than that. So the outcomes, well, it's early days yet. We've had this new program just accredited only in February by the Training Accreditation Council, and we've enrolled so far about 30 students in the program. There are about 500 students who are completing a construction-related course each year within the education system in WA. when you understand that we have a workforce which represents 10% of the industry, you can see we're simply not getting enough of the young people that we need. And one of the things we intend to do is to really promote the importance of vocational education and training, the importance of a trade career within the construction industry to everybody concerned. And that's starting to happen. We're starting to see that culture changing, which is really important, I think, for Western Australia and Australia. The students are going to obviously be more work ready and more productive. They will obviously, the other thing that I think is important about this is that it will change the culture within the school system, and we've certainly talked with a number of the schools. We've been working with a number of the schools already. One of the things that I think we're promoting, importantly to students and parents and teachers in the industry, is that young people can complete a VET qualification. They can end up in an apprenticeship and subsequently as a tradesperson in a very short space of time. But their student friend might go to university, complete 4 years in university and leave university with a $30,000 or $40,000 student debt and be receiving roughly the same sort of salary. Tradespeople who complete their apprenticeship in Western Australia are earning $70,000 and $80,000 a year already. And one of the problems we have in Western Australia is that they're no sooner trained up, but the resources industry steals them. So that $70,000 or $80,000 isn't even attractive to keep these young people in the industry at the present time. Be that as it may, we still must continue to do what we're doing. And I'm not sure how much time I've got left, Geraldine. Thank you. 50% of the construction industry workforce is trades related. So there are enormous opportunities within this industry for people to pursue a career, not just within the trade, but there are over 100 different occupations in the industry. Many of the builders and contractors and owners of building companies in Western Australia who are very successful here started their career as an apprentice within the industry. That's the message we're getting across to young people within schools and to their parents and to the teachers, and we're certainly having an impact in that area. Now, one of the great examples, I think, of where we have been able to achieve some success is working with schools, and one of those has been Clarkson Community High School. So it's my pleasure to hand over to you in a minute. Justine McNaught-Conroy is with us this afternoon. Justine is the Deputy Principal of Clarkson. Clarkson's been doing some fantastic work training young people and educating them in the construction area, and I think you'll hear from her about specifically how she and her school has been involved in that program. So thank you for your time, and I'm going to hand over to Justine. Thank you.
So of our 290 students, we have about 130 involved in VET, and approximately this makes up about 45% of our senior school cohort. This really shows that at our school, we see VET as equally important to university education bound courses, and it's really, even for some of our students, they've found an alternative entry way into university. VET programs at our school are specifically designed to support students in their transition from school to work. In the same way that ATAR students or university-bound students meet WASTE requirements to graduate from high school, well, so too do our VET students. However, further to this, our VET students also gain, on top of their WASTE graduation, gain full certificate nationally recognised qualifications, as well as extensive work experience in the industry of their choice. This, of course, makes our VET students highly desirable to employers, and of course prepares them as they leave school with their defined career pathway. With the support of their parents, over the last 12 years, our students have chosen to undertake training in a vast array of areas, including building and construction, beauty, automotive, tiling, hospitality, carpentry, nursing, childcare, business, plastering, engineering, electrotechnology, warehousing, retail and tourism. So you can see that there's certainly a course for everybody. Exactly as outlined by Mr Dawson, career counselling for our students begins in Year 10, and it's an extremely essential time on our school calendar. In Year 10, students have the opportunity to become involved in the trade training courses, particularly this year has been so far in the mortar and wet trades, and our Year 10 students that have attended these courses have come back to school enthused about following a VET pathway in senior school already. In the middle of Year 10, A course counselling meeting is held, which involves a student, the parent and a course counsellor, and it's a mandatory meeting that every child in Year 10 is required to undertake. And it's at this meeting where we discuss with students and their parents what options and pathways their child has to pursue. It's never a very difficult sell to sell the idea of a trade to parents, as so many of them, of parents of our students at our school, have a trade background and they really see that their child has a potential to earn a good income, have opportunities for career advancement, and even possibly open their own business one day. Students choose their educational pathway and, of course, then the training package which they'd like to pursue. So, for example, that could be in building and construction, IT, childcare, hospitality, or even business. They also choose a specific career pathway they'd like to pursue so that we can then match their work placement with their career choice. In Year 11, students generally undertake a more generalised program, including English and maths, in order to build their literacy and numeracy skills. That being said, however, where possible, teachers really do endeavour to contextualise the learning to suit the future pathway of their student. So, for example, in maths, the maths work may focus on the geometry or measurement skills required in the construction area that they choose to go into. Students also to undertake career education and workplace learning units, and it's here that they're prepared for the world of work with how to write resumes, how to act professionally in an environment, and build that maturity required to go into the world of work. On top of this, students undertake specific trade training 1 day a week at a TAFE institute, followed by 1 day a week in work placement. In Year 12, students then have the further opportunity to hone their skills with a focus on their specific area of interest. Students generally have a number of work placements throughout their senior school years, allowing them to experience a number of different work placements. Weekly work placement is very useful as it prepares future apprentices, as it allows them to build up the physical strength required to undertake these demanding jobs with a full understanding of the work environment. Interestingly, many of our students get offered work placements from their work placement, both full-time and on weekends. Work placements are also important in providing students with the experience in their career choice firsthand. So, for example, currently we have a young lady who is very keen to become a tiler. By undertaking the Certificate 2 in Building and Construction, she's developing the general trade skills that will allow her to be an all-rounder with bricklaying and plastering skills. But then she's also getting direct experience through her work placement with tiling industry professionals. I have no doubt she'll go on to be a highly skilled apprentice in the future. For the last 4 years, Clarkson has maintained a place in the top 50 vet schools in the state, and this, I believe, is due to the strong partnerships that we develop with industry professionals, training professionals and local businesses in the area. Increasingly, I believe students are wanting to graduate from high school. Few students see following a trade pathway into employment as a quick escape route out of high school, as historically might have been the case. Students and their parents see trade training course as a pathway to a successful career. Earlier this year, we had 2 builders who were looking for 2 students from TAFE as apprentices, and we found that only one of our students actually put their hand up for these positions, mainly because of the cohort of students that we had. They wanted to graduate from high school first. They strongly believe that their future prospects are enhanced by both graduating from high school and achieving nationally accredited qualifications and then undertaking employment. Many of our students who move on into a school-based traineeship in Year 12 attend school 3 days per week and then work in an industry placement 2 days a week for a small income. This is, of course, a great incentive for students to graduate from school and continue on. Recently, a Year 12 student of ours was offered an excellent apprenticeship as a carpenter. It was from a work placement employer that he had been working with for a few months, and they thought that he would certainly suit their career, their company. However, as he was only 13 weeks away from high school graduation, he was tempted to say no and turn this opportunity down. Fortunately, by implementing a school-based traineeship model, the student has been able to say yes to the job, complete high school to achieve WAISC graduation and be paid for his work days. So it's certainly a fantastic situation for both employer and student. And of course his family are excited about his career prospects. So despite some of the logistical challenges of timetabling a vet program and finding work placements, it's guaranteed that vet programs will certainly continue to feature strongly in the suite of options offered by Clarkson Community High School. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I've been dreading this moment. Last speaker, and after all the delegation members have elaborated on the policy, the numbers in India, I was wondering what are the points that if ever going to speak from here. And the school, of course, comes the last. After you speak about colleges, post-graduation, degree, doctorates, now it's the school's time. Going top to bottom, I suppose. Well, now I'm not in the backdrop of what my other delegation members had already shared with you. That is the numbers that almost overwhelm the attempts that we make. Like Mr. Krishna was saying, you keep on doing it and you realize you have not gone anywhere. So it's like the treadmill that you walk on. You're tired, you see the number, the meter, the kilometers you have walked, but at the same time you realize you are standing the place where you started at. So the vocational education that we are looking at the school level is in this backdrop where you have the huge numbers, the huge number of schools, and the federal setup which we have, because that is one very critical input that we keep in mind when we formulate our policies, formulate them in a manner that it's open-ended enough for the state governments, which of course are as autonomous, as independent as the central government is on the subject of education. So the policy formulation for vocational education needs to take in a lot of other inputs, keeping in mind the players that are going to come in with their own value sets, their own needs, their own requirements, and their own political angularities that always have a play in the whole scheme of things, the way things are decided. One aspect which I thought I'll flag it here in my intervention is the purest educationist viewpoint on vocational education in the schools. Because there's a viewpoint where where we talk about vocational education, the stigma attached to it, and the caste system that prevails where only the economically poor children maybe get into the vocational skills, and you have the upper caste, so to say, going on for the general formal education. Now the educationists who have a purer view of things oppose the introduction of vocational education in the school. At the class 11, class 9th, where you're talking about the framework that you saw, the level one of the vocational starts at the class 9th. Now the feeling there is that it's an age where the child should not be made to make a choice about whether he wants to see education as only for employability and it should be more holistic, or you not get into giving him those choices and letting him have a holistic education till he's at an age where he looks at education as a medium for his employability. So the viewpoint is that education should not be seen as a sole purpose for employability, and it should be seen more as an individual's growth, individual's evolution as a personality, and his choices in life may come later and we need not prepare him specifically for him at the school level. Whereas the vocational education that we are now looking at, the framework with which we are working at, is looking at introducing vocationalization at the class 9th, 10th, then taking on a streamed attitude, streaming the aptitude of the child into specific sector skills at the class 11th and 12th. So this is an issue which is occupying a lot of our time in coming to a balance as to where the general studies should be put in place and how do you balance the vocational part coming into the school curriculum at the class 9. The second issue that I've been wanting to put on table here is when we look at industry, it's not a monolith we are talking about. Because the sector skill councils when we started our pilots in the schools, we started with an understanding that when we talk of sector skill councils, it's a monolith, it's a one organism which is going to speak up for the whole sector as such, and it's going to give us the deliverables that we need to to ensure that the outputs and the outcomes that we are envisaging are there in place. But slowly, over a period of time, we have realized that the sector skill councils or the industry, if you talk about, say, IT industry, it's not one voice, because the requirements at each of the levels within the verticals, there are so many sub-verticals within one single vertical and so many horizontals, so many hierarchies that we realized that we hadn't factored in. For instance, when we talked about an occupation standard for IT, we realized at the national level you might have players such as Microsoft, Intel, and brands of that level. And at the district level and the state level, where we are actually looking at the student being employed by a local industry, the requirements, the needs of the potential employers were totally at variance and totally different. Now, how does this get factored into while you are formulating your own occupational standards is something of an issue, of a challenge that we are trying to address, where now the states have come up. As I said, they are autonomous enough to have their own options being explored into. So now they have an option of saying, well, your sector skill councils at the national level are too much of a macro level indicators. We need more field level, district level, potential employers from the state level, their requirements to be factored in. So we may go for a sector skill council at the local level. So the contextualization, the localization of the occupation standards within the sectors also. We didn't envisage that it was going to be so complex, and there would be a need to sort of put in more levels while you're getting into this exercise of framing your occupational standards for a very globally, universally standardized sector like even the IT. So that's again an issue which we are grappling with at the school level. And the third and the last one that I would like to talk about here is the continuum of the industry's engagement with us. In India, we started at the school level where we had no industry engagement. Then we realized there was no ownership from them, so the children were taught certain skills for which there were no takers, so they ended up not being able to grow up the education ladder. They were not employed by the employers because they didn't see any connect between what they needed and what we were teaching the children. Now we are getting into a stage where we have realized industry engagement is very essential. We are engaging with them. And like Mr. Krishna said, it's a difficult job to keep the industrial partners engaged with us in the way that we want to, with the full-time dedication that is needed at this level where we are in the process of launching it. At the same time, I think the continuum ends where it's more the ownership being with the industry and the government getting only engaged and playing a very facilitative role. I suppose the gradual evolution of this would be that the continuum, the end of the continuum is reached, where the partners here, the industrial partners here, own up this whole initiative, because this is something that they need. It is their requirement that one is trying to cater to here. Of course, the child's future is also being ensured, but the government's role should, over a period of time, come down and slide down to a level where it just facilitates and gets the two players together. And incidentally, I wanted to end it up with saying I've met most of the Indian private agencies here than my home place. So they were saying we must have more of these conferences here so that we get to meet the governments. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.